Girl helps quiet old man at store. That night, 3 black SUVs park outside her home. The automatic doors sighed open with a tired groan as June stepped into the corner store, the fluorescent lights flickering like they were trying to stay awake. It was a small place, just 2 aisles and a freezer section that never quite froze anything fully. The kind of store where everyone knew each other's name, or at least their parents. June, all braces and secondhand hoodie, headed straight for the gum aisle. She didn't need gum. She just needed 5 minutes away from her mom's yelling about bills and her stepdad's cigarette smoke curling through every room. She bent over to grab a pack when she saw him, standing still, too still, in front of the canned goods. The old man looked like he didn't belong here. Not just because of the pressed button-down shirt tucked too neatly into faded jeans, or the way his boots looked like they had walked through something heavier than suburban sidewalks. It was the silence around him, like he carried it with him, thick and deliberate. June watched him for a moment. He held a can of soup in his hand like he wasn't sure what to do with it. His hands trembled slightly. Not from age, from something else. Hesitation. Pain, maybe. His eyes weren't cloudy like most old folks. They were sharp, focused, but distant too, watching something no one else could see. "Sir?" she asked, stepping a little closer. The man didn't flinch. He just turned slowly, as if measuring her presence. His voice, when it came, was soft but deep. "I can't find the one without sodium," he said, almost apologetically. June looked down at the can. She smiled gently. "That one's the worst. Way too salty. Here." She reached up and grabbed a low-sodium version from the top shelf. "This is what my granddad used to get. He said it didn't taste like much, but it didn't try to kill you either." The man gave a small, reluctant smile. Just the edge of one. Wise man. "Yeah," she said. "He was." He nodded, took the can, and began to walk toward the register. Slow, deliberate steps, each one measured. June didn't think much more of it until she saw the clerk, Barry, grumble under his breath. Barry was 22 and bitter about it, the kind of guy who used the store's radio to blast metal and wore mirrored sunglasses indoors. "You're holding up the line, old man," Barry muttered. There was no one behind him. June stepped forward, standing between them. "Don't talk to him like that," she said, voice steady. Barry raised an eyebrow. "You his lawyer now?" "No," she said. "Just someone who still has manners." The old man didn't say anything. He just placed his soup on the counter, exact change already in hand. He gave June a nod before walking out into the evening, the bells on the door jingling softly behind him. And that would have been the end of it. Except that night, June's mother shook her awake just past midnight. "June," she whispered, there's 3 black SUVs parked outside. Just sitting there." June blinked. "What?" Her mother pointed out the window. And there they were. 3 matte black vehicles. No logos. No headlights. Engines idling like distant thunder. They didn't move. The 3 black SUVs sat in absolute stillness across the street, parked nose to nose like sentinels. No one stepped out. No lights flickered on. Just the low, almost inaudible hum of idling engines. Their windows were tinted so dark they looked like obsidian, swallowing all reflection. June stared from behind the curtain, heart racing in her chest like it didn't belong there. She counted the seconds, then the minutes. Nothing. Just that hum, constant and deliberate, like it was waiting for her to do something. "Should I call someone?" her mom asked, clutching a phone in one hand but not dialing. "The police?" June hesitated. Something in her gut said no. Not fear, something else. The way those vehicles were positioned, the way they hadn't come to the door or made any noise. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a message. Or a watchful eye. Her mom kept pacing. "What did you do today? Who did you talk to?" June stopped herself. Then slowly, her mind traced back to the grocery store. The old man. The soup. Barry's comment. Her voice rising in defense. Her stepping forward, shielding someone who didn't ask for help but maybe needed it. "Just some guy at the store," she said finally. He looked tired. "I helped him find soup." Her mother blinked at her. "And that somehow leads to government-looking SUVs outside our house." "I don't know," June whispered. "But it wasn't nothing. They didn't sleep that night. At some point, Around 4:15 a.m., the SUVs pulled away, all at once, slow and in perfect sync. No headlights. Just the quiet crunch of tires over gravel and a mechanical grace that didn't match anything about their sleepy neighborhood. By morning, there was no sign they'd ever been there. No tire marks. No sound. Just dew on the lawn and an unusual silence in the street. At school, June couldn't focus. Every time a black car passed the window, her stomach clenched. She half expected someone in a suit to walk through the classroom door, call her name, and say there'd been a mistake. Instead, it was Barry who found her. He cornered her by the vending machines, gum chewing and sweat-stained. "Hey," he said, eyes darting. "What?" "That old guy you were helping yesterday," Barry said. "You know who he is?" June shook her head slowly. "No." "What?" Barry swallowed, suddenly pale under the harsh hallway lights. "Some guys came to the store late last night. Real quiet. Suits. Asked about him. Asked about you too. They didn't say anything else. Just looked around, nodded, and left." June's breath caught in her throat. "And one of them left this." Barry handed her a small item wrapped in a brown napkin. June unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a military challenge coin, darkened with age, heavy in the palm. On one side, an eagle gripping a trident and lightning bolts. On the other, the words burned deep into the metal. "Forgotten, not lost." June stared at the coin in her hand, its cold weight pressing down on her skin like it had history. The edge was notched, deliberately, not from wear. Military, clearly, but not just standard issue. This wasn't something you found in a pawn shop or ordered online. This was the kind of coin that got passed between ghosts. She turned it over again. "Forgotten, not lost." The letters weren't polished like a trophy. They were carved deep, with purpose. The kind of purpose that came from people who had seen the worst and still walked back into it. "Who gave this to you?" she asked Barry, her voice quieter now. He shrugged, more spooked than smug for once. "One of the guys. Didn't say a word. Just left it on the counter and walked out." They all looked like the kind of people who make other people disappear. June tucked the coin deep into her pocket. For the rest of the day, it was all she could think about. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was curiosity now, heavy and magnetic. Who was that man? And why would anyone care about her helping him pick out a can of soup? That night, after dinner, June sat on the edge of her bed with the coin in one hand and her laptop in the other. She started digging. Military forums, coin collector threads, Reddit rabbit holes. It wasn't easy, but eventually she found it. A blurry photo of a near-identical coin posted in a thread titled "Unacknowledged Units and Legacy Operators." The comment beneath read, "Only ever seen 2 of these. Issued to Tier 0 teams. No unit number, no branch. They didn't exist on paper. If someone gives you this coin, you don't talk. You listen." June's fingers hovered over the trackpad. Tier 0? The article didn't explain much, but the tone was clear. These were the ones who never wore name tapes, who didn't have families waiting at home because they couldn't afford to have them. The invisible wall between special forces and whatever came after that. This man was from the other side. The next day, she returned to the store. Not for soup, just to see if he might show up again. She waited 20 minutes near the front, pretending to compare snacks she'd never buy. Then she saw him. Same neat shirt, same slow, deliberate steps, the same silence that moved with him. He paused when he saw her. A soft nod. No surprise. Almost like he knew she'd come back. "I got something," she said, holding up the coin. "Someone left this for me." He looked at it for a long time. Then finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't carry that unless you're ready." June blinked. Ready for what? The man didn't answer. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo. Old, faded, black and white. He handed it to her. It was a squad. 8 men. Mud-caked, armed to the teeth, faces streaked with camouflage. One of them, barely recognizable under the years, was him. But it was the man standing behind him that made June freeze. She'd seen that face before, framed on her grandmother's mantle. Her great-uncle Thomas. The air left her lungs. June stared at the photograph, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. The man in the back row, rifle slung over his shoulder, jaw set like carved stone, wasn't just familiar. He was family. She remembered the photo on her grandmother's mantel. A younger version, in dress blues, stiff and formal. Her great-uncle Thomas. The man no one in the family ever really talked about. He had gone missing decades ago. Not killed. Not captured. Just gone. June's mother once said, in a hushed voice over tea, he joined some unit that didn't exist. Your grandmother got a folded flag and nothing else. Now here he was. Alive in an old photo, not in dress blues, but in field gear that didn't match any regulation uniform. Face streaked in dirt. A shadow of a grin beneath a hardened gaze. June looked up at the old man, heart pounding. This is him. This is Thomas McKinley. He was my great-uncle. The old man didn't react with surprise. Just a quiet nod, as if he already knew. He was the best of us, he said, voice low. Better than me. We all owed him more than we could repay. June swallowed. What happened to him? The old man's eyes shifted slightly, but his face remained steady. Same thing that happens to anyone who follows orders too far into the dark. He disappeared so others wouldn't have to. It wasn't a metaphor. It was literal. The kind of disappearance that didn't leave a trail or a body, just silence and questions. Who are you? She asked. The man paused. Then he reached slowly into his wallet and unfolded a small piece of worn, water-stained paper. On it, a name. Chief Warrant Officer Gabriel Reese. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Deactivated. You can call me Gabe, he said. But that title, it belongs to another time. June looked at him, really looked this time. The way his shoulders settled square even when at rest. The faint, silvery line of an old scar beneath his jaw. The calluses on his hands, too even to come from carpentry, too precise to be accidental. This man hadn't just served. He'd led men through nightmares. Why did those people come to my house? She asked. Gabe exhaled through his nose. Because kindness, especially the kind that isn't asked for, echoes. That doesn't make sense. It will, he said. Soon. He glanced toward the street. June followed his eyes and saw something parked in the distance. Another black SUV, but not quite like the others. This one was older. Dust on the fenders. License plate half missing. It didn't idle. It just waited. They're not here to hurt you, Gabe said softly. They're watching because you stepped into something most people walk past. You didn't run. You didn't hesitate. June looked down at the coin in her hand again. Is this some kind of test? Gabe gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not for you. For us. Then he nodded toward the SUV. Come. There's something you need to see. The inside of the SUV smelled faintly of oil and old leather. Not like a family car, but a vehicle meant for purpose. Utilitarian. Every inch of it was clean, but not polished. A duffel bag sat by the driver's feet, sealed shut, with the initials GR barely visible through years of wear. June sat in the back, still clutching the coin. Gabe didn't speak for the first few minutes of the drive. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, but steady, like a hum that filled the space between breaths. Outside, the suburban streets rolled past in soft evening hues, kids playing in yards, porch lights flickering on. Normalcy. Where are we going? June finally asked. To meet someone, Gabe said. Someone who remembers Thomas. Someone who needs to know what you did. She blinked. I just helped you find a can of soup. Gabe's eyes didn't leave the road. That may be how it started. But it's not why they came. June furrowed her brow, confused. You keep saying they. Who are they? They're what's left, he said quietly. Of a unit that never had a name. After all the medals, after all the wars, what remains are fragments. Ghosts scattered across the country, buried under civilian lives. But we still watch. We still listen. And when one of ours is treated with decency by someone who has no reason to give it, he glanced at her through the rearview mirror. We take notice. They turned off the main road. The houses grew older, smaller. Brick chimneys, American flags sun-bleached on front porches. Then, finally, they pulled into a long gravel driveway leading up to what looked like a forgotten farmhouse. The siding was faded, the roof sagging in one corner. But there was something almost sacred in its stillness, a kind of quiet reverence. Stay close, Gabe said. They stepped out. A breeze passed through the tall grass. rustling like whispers in a chapel. June followed him up the creaking steps of the porch. He knocked 3 times, deliberate, rhythmic. The door opened just a crack. An elderly woman peeked out, sharp eyes, braided silver hair, and a subtle, commanding presence. She looked at Gabe and immediately opened the door fully, without a word. Inside, the house was a gallery of memory. Framed photographs of men in uniform, a folded American flag in a triangular case on the mantel, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. A faint smell of cedar and gun oil lingered in the air. The woman turned to June. "You're Thomas's kin?" June nodded. The woman studied her, then gave a single nod. "He talked about you. Said if there was ever someone to carry his name forward, it'd be his niece's girl." Gabe stepped forward. "She helped me. And now, they've marked her." The woman didn't flinch. She walked to a cabinet, pulled out a second coin, nearly identical to the one June carried, then placed it in her palm. "You've been seen now," she said solemnly. "And once you've been seen, you don't go unseen." The old woman's name was Helen. She didn't offer coffee or tea, just a seat and silence, the kind that doesn't fill space, but clears it. June sat on the edge of an old leather chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the second coin Helen had handed her. It was nearly identical to the first, but where one read, "Forgotten, not lost," this one bore 3 words more chilling in their simplicity. Eyes still open, Helen sat across from her, not frail but grounded. Every gesture slow, deliberate. She held herself like someone who had carried secrets longer than most people lived. "You know what that means?" Helen asked, motioning to the coin. June shook her head. "It's a legacy mark," Helen explained. "Meant for civilians who've brushed too close to the edges. We don't hand them out for favors or good intentions. Only when someone steps past the line. Usually without knowing it." June looked to Gabe for clarity. He remained silent, arms crossed, eyes scanning the window as if expecting movement. Helen continued. "Thomas was part of a cell called Echo 9. Never on the books. Their missions weren't debriefed, just done. If they returned, they were ghosts. If they didn't, they were never there." June's voice was almost a whisper. "Why would they want to stay hidden, even from their own country?" "Because sometimes," Gabe said finally, "the things you do for your country aren't things your country wants to admit it needed." Helen nodded slowly. "Thomas gave his life on a mission so dark it doesn't exist in official records. But a few of us kept track. Of the men, of the women, of their families. Because someone had to remember." June tightened her grip on the coin. "So why me?" she asked. "Why now? I just helped you pick out soup." Gabe turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Because in a world that forgets its heroes the moment they stop serving, someone who still sees them as human, not a burden, not a relic, is rare. You didn't look at me with pity. You didn't look through me. You saw me. That matters." Helen leaned forward. "And now they're watching you because you saw something most people don't. And you acted. That makes waves. Small ones, but they reach places. Places we thought were still." June felt the air shift. The room itself seemed to grow heavier. "So what happens now?" Helen looked to Gabe, who gave a slow nod. Helen stood and walked to a dusty shelf. She pulled out an old shoebox, yellowed and bound with a thin strip of black cloth. Inside were photographs, maps, hand-drawn notes, code words, phrases, fragments of missions never named. She placed the box in June's lap. "You need to know where you come from," she said. June opened the lid. The first photo inside was of her great-uncle Thomas, but not in uniform. He was holding a baby girl. And on the back of the photo, written in smudged ink, "To my niece. Raise her to be kind. She'll carry more than she knows." June stared at the photograph, her breath catching as her fingers ran along the worn edges. The ink had bled into the paper with time, but the message was still clear. Her great-uncle hadn't just known about her. He had believed something about her future, about her kindness. The baby in his arms, barely weeks old, had a tuft of dark hair and a sleepy, confused expression. Her mother had that same look in old baby photos. So this was real. June's hands trembled slightly as she picked through the contents of the shoebox. Each item was another shard of someone else's life, scraps of a puzzle too dangerous to finish but too sacred to discard. There were crumpled mission logs, redacted so heavily that only the times and weather conditions were visible, napkins with code names scribbled in pencil, a torn shoulder patch with no emblem, a cassette tape labeled simply Echo, and tucked into the corner, wrapped in cloth, a tiny brass pin, a trident. She looked to Helen. This is all real. Helen nodded. This is all that's left. The government may forget. People may move on. But the weight of service, it doesn't leave you. And it doesn't leave your family either. Gabe finally spoke again, quieter than before. Most people think legacy is medals and folded flags. But it's not. Legacy is what we choose to remember, and what we choose to carry forward. June wasn't sure what she was supposed to carry, but she did know she wasn't ready to walk away from this. Not yet. Why was I marked? She asked again, holding up the second coin. Who decides that? Helen and Gabe exchanged a long look, the kind that carried years of unspoken conversations. It's not a decision, Gabe said. It's an acknowledgement. You stepped into something without asking for anything. You stood up when it wasn't safe or convenient. That coin isn't a reward. It's a key. A key to what? To the truth. To the old lines that still exist, even when the world pretends they don't. To people like us, watching, remembering, stepping in when it matters. Helen nodded slowly. But keys also open doors. And once they're opened, you don't always get to close them again. June didn't answer right away. She looked down at the contents of the box again, then carefully folded the photograph back into its envelope. What happened to the rest of his team? She asked. Gabe's expression shifted, not sad, but solemn. Some are gone. Some faded into new lives. But a few still watch from the shadows. He walked over to a dusty bookshelf, pulled a black binder from behind a row of encyclopedias, and opened it. Inside were names, handwritten, coordinates, postmarks. We call them the quiet, he said. Veterans without graves. Soldiers without records. But they never stopped serving. He closed the binder and met June's gaze. And now they've taken an interest in you. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, just full. Like there was too much to say and not enough right words to say it. The sun had dipped low by now, casting long golden beams across Helen's hardwood floor. Dust drifted lazily in the light. Time had slowed down in this house. Or maybe it just moved differently here. June stared at the binder Gabe had set on the table. Its cover was blank, but its presence felt anything but empty. You keep a list? She asked. Gabe nodded. Only the ones who want to be found in case the world ever needs them again. He opened to the first page. A single name written in block letters. Call sign, Nomad. Status, unknown. Last seen, Northern Cascades. Note, refused burial. Said he hadn't earned rest yet. Beneath it, a hand-drawn map marked with red circles and cryptic notations. June skimmed through more names. Phantom, Widow, Preacher, Ghost Dog. One after another, all written by hand, with reverence. These aren't just names, Gabe said. They're oaths. The quiet don't talk. They don't show off. But they remember. And sometimes they return. To do what? She asked. Whatever needs to be done. June felt a chill. Not fear, awe. This wasn't about soldiers hiding from the world. It was about protectors waiting until the world needed protecting again. But I'm just a kid, she said softly. Why would any of this matter to me? Helen leaned forward, her eyes piercing but kind. Because the world doesn't change when heroes kick down doors. It changes when someone chooses to stand up without being asked. That's what Thomas believed. And it's what you did. June swallowed hard. I didn't know it would mean all this. Most people don't, Gabe said. But it doesn't change what it means. Just then, a soft chime echoed from Helen's hallway. A security sensor. Gabe stood immediately. Not rushed. Not alarmed. Just ready. Helen pressed a button on a small panel beside the mantel. A monitor blinked on, grainy black and white. One SUV. Parked at the edge of the property. Not black this time. Dark gray dust-streaked. Still. Not ours, Gabe said. Helen narrowed her eyes. That's a message. What kind? June asked. The respectful kind, Gabe said. They could have come in. Could have knocked. But they're waiting. which means someone's coming who wants to be seen. Helen turned to June. It's time for you to see what legacy really looks like. She rose, calm and measured, and motioned toward the front porch. Outside, the air had shifted. The sunset had turned the sky to burning gold and blood orange. The crickets had fallen silent. And as June stepped onto the porch, a figure emerged from the SUV. Not military, not threatening. A woman, late 50s, dressed in simple jeans and a windbreaker. Her walk was confident, not aggressive, not boastful, just certain. Gabe let out a quiet breath. Command. She approached without haste, the gravel crunching softly under her boots, one hand in her pocket, the other holding nothing but the air around her. Her presence said everything that needed saying. She didn't need medals or introductions. You could tell by the way Gabe shifted, not nervously, but with quiet respect, that this woman had once given orders that shaped missions no one could speak about. Helen stood on the porch, arms crossed, but eyes softened. June stayed just behind them, her heart racing again, unsure why. The woman stopped 5 feet from the steps. She looked up at Gabe and offered a nod. Not one of greeting, but of recognition. Chief, she said. Commander, Gabe replied. Then silence again, heavy, charged. Finally, the woman looked to June. So you're the one. June blinked. The one what? The woman gave a small, dry smile. The one who reminded a warrior what it felt like to be human. Gabe cleared his throat. She stepped up. Small act. Big echo. The commander nodded slowly. That's usually how it starts. She climbed the porch steps and sat on the old wooden bench as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Her eyes met June's. They were sharp, but not unkind. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and still looked for good in people. My name's Olivia Cardenas, she said. Used to run dark teams out of Langley. Before that, tier ops in Libya, Kashmir, and places you won't find on maps. I've buried friends, burned records, and pulled broken men out of jungles with nothing but a flashlight and a prayer. June didn't know what to say. I'm telling you this, Olivia continued, because you've stepped into a current that doesn't run on surface maps. Most civilians never touch it. And the ones that do, they don't always come back. I didn't ask for this, June said quietly. Neither did any of us, Olivia replied. But here we are. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. Thomas McKinley was one of the finest operators I ever worked with, she said. He had a way of steadying a whole team with just a look. No shouting, no bravado, just presence. June nodded, her throat tight. He disappeared on a mission code-named Iron Veil, Olivia said. We were told he was compromised, but I never believed it. He left something behind, not intel. Intention. He said someone would remember him, not because of what he did, but because of who he loved. She looked at June again. That person was your grandmother, and now it's you. June felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. What does that mean for me? She asked. Olivia stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and pointed out toward the tree-line. A line of vehicles was emerging, slowly, silently, coming up the long road like ghosts rising from the past. 10, maybe more. One by one, the quiet were arriving. The quiet hum of engines filled the dusk like a distant storm rolling in. One by one, dark vehicles appeared through the trees, their shapes barely visible against the deepening twilight. The quiet had come. June's breath caught as each SUV, truck, and unmarked van crept down the gravel driveway. Headlights off, but presence undeniable. It was as if a shadow army rose from the folds of time, summoned by a single act of kindness. Olivia stood tall on the porch, eyes sharp and calculating. They're here, she said simply. The ones who never asked for recognition, but earned it anyway. June felt a weight settle over her shoulders. These weren't just strangers. These were ghosts, legends, veterans like Gabe and Thomas, men and women who lived between the cracks of history. A dark figure stepped out first, a man tall and broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate precision. His face was partially hidden beneath a low cap, but his stance spoke of decades in the field. One by one, others followed, each one carrying a story written in scars and silence. A woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. A younger man with a cautious smile and hands that refused to relax. They gathered near the porch without a word, a silent congregation. Helen approached June and whispered, "This is your legacy now." Gabe nodded. "They came because you reminded us all why we keep going. Why we keep watching." June's heart pounded louder than the engines. These people, these warriors, didn't just carry weapons. They carried history, honor, and a burden few could imagine. Olivia turned to the group and spoke softly. "Tonight we honor the past, but tomorrow we look forward. We watch over those who watch over us." June stepped forward, the coin heavy in her palm. She looked at each face, unyielding, weary, yet full of quiet strength. One man caught her eye, his gaze steady. "Welcome," he said simply. The weight of their presence was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else: hope. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought with bullets or bombs, but with quiet acts of humanity that ripple through time. June understood now. This wasn't just a story about an old man or a simple act of kindness. It was about honor restored, about a family reclaimed, about the invisible lines that bind us all. As the night deepened and the quiet stood together, the world outside moved on unaware, but inside that small farmhouse, a new chapter was beginning. The night wrapped around the farmhouse like a heavy cloak, stars pinpricks in the black velvet sky. Inside, the quiet settled into a rhythm born of years spent operating in silence. No fanfare, no celebration, just presence. June sat between Gabe and Helen, the coins resting heavy on the small table before her. The room hummed with unspoken history, memories exchanged through glances and pauses rather than words. Olivia, now pacing slowly, stopped by a weathered map pinned to the wall. "This legacy," she said, voice low and steady, "is not about medals or headlines. It's about carrying forward the weight of the unseen." Gabe nodded. "We lost a lot along the way. Brothers and sisters who never came home. Stories that never got told. Names erased from records." Helen added, "But those sacrifices don't vanish just because they're forgotten by some. They live on in those who remember, in those who carry the burden of truth." June thought of her great-uncle Thomas, of the quiet strength she saw in Gabe, and now in this gathering of warriors who had stepped out of shadows to honor a single act of kindness. "This is bigger than me," she said softly. "I'm just a girl who helped an old man." Olivia smiled, subtle but fierce. "That's exactly why you're here. Sometimes, the quietest moments spark the loudest echoes." The room fell into silence again, comfortable and deep. Suddenly, Gabe spoke. "There's one more thing you need to understand." June looked up. "What's that?" "The world out there," he said, "still needs people who will stand when it's easier to turn away. You're part of a network now. Quiet, vigilant, unassuming. A shield for those who've been overlooked." Helen leaned forward, eyes steady. "It won't always be easy. Sometimes you'll be invisible. Sometimes you'll be misunderstood. But you'll never be alone." June felt a swell of something fierce inside her, a mixture of pride and responsibility she hadn't known she was ready for. Olivia nodded toward the door. "And when the time comes, you'll be called upon. Not because you seek glory, but because you carry the heart to answer." June stood slowly, looking at the faces gathered around her. These were not just ghosts of wars past. They were living proof of endurance, humility, and honor. In that quiet farmhouse, surrounded by warriors who had given everything and asked for nothing, June realized her own journey was only beginning. The farmhouse had fallen into a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The stars shone like scattered diamonds against the black canvas above, distant and indifferent, yet steady, witnesses to everything below. June stood on the creaking porch, the two challenge coins heavy in her palm. The cold metal pressed into her skin, reminding her of everything she'd learned tonight. The lives lived in shadows, the sacrifices made without thanks, the unspoken bonds that stretched across time and space. This was no ordinary weight. It was a burden, a promise, and a calling all wrapped into one. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly. Gabe appeared, his presence calm but solid, like the last anchor in a stormy sea. He stood beside her, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, eyes tracing the same endless sky. "You're ready for this," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. June turned to him, searching for any hint of doubt or hesitation, but found none. Only a quiet strength that could only come from decades of hard truths. Ready? I'm just a kid. Maybe, Gabe admitted, but you've got the heart that counts. That's more important than age or experience. She swallowed hard. Will I ever get a chance to just be normal again? Go to school, hang out with friends, live my life without all this hanging over me. Gabe's gaze softened with something like understanding, maybe even regret. Normal is a tricky word. After you've seen what's out there, after you've touched the edges of things most people never want to see, life never feels quite the same. June looked down at the coins again. What if I'm scared? Fear's part of it, Gabe said plainly. But courage is moving forward despite it. Being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The night held its breath. The wind rustled the leaves, a subtle chorus joining the unspoken conversation. There will be days when you feel invisible, Gabe continued. When your efforts go unnoticed, and the world seems blind to what you do. June nodded slowly. Why keep going then? Why not just walk away? Because someone has to, Gabe said, his voice steady as the earth beneath their feet. Because kindness matters, even when it goes unseen. Because honor isn't just about medals or ceremonies. It's about presence, showing up, standing firm, and never forgetting who you are. A soft sound interrupted them, gravel crunching beneath boots. Olivia appeared, her silhouette framed by moonlight. She walked up the driveway with the same measured confidence she'd shown earlier, eyes sharp but kind. Time to rest, Olivia said as she reached the porch, her voice carrying a calm authority. Tomorrow, the real work begins. June looked out toward the row of dark SUVs, their shapes like sentinels waiting in the shadows. The quiet had gathered tonight, but their mission stretched far beyond the farmhouse walls. As the night deepened, the weight of the legacy settled fully on June's shoulders. She was no longer just a girl who helped an old man at a store. She was part of something larger, a chain of honor, sacrifice, and quiet strength that stretched across generations. For the first time in her life, she felt it, belonging. And she knew, without a doubt, she would never be alone again. Morning light seeped softly through the cracks in the weathered curtains, painting the farmhouse walls with pale gold. June stirred awake, the weight of the coins still resting heavy in her pocket. Tangible reminders of a night that felt more like a dream, or a crossing into a new reality. Outside, the world was waking, but inside the house, a calm persisted. The quiet had dispersed into the early morning mist like shadows dissolving at first light, leaving behind an echo of their presence in the quiet air. June rose and found Gabe already in the kitchen, brewing coffee with a practiced, steady hand. The rich aroma filled the small room, a simple comfort amidst complex truths. You sleep? Gabe asked without looking up. Not really, June admitted. Too many thoughts. He nodded knowingly. That's normal. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug he handed her and took a slow sip, the bitterness grounding her. Tell me something, she said softly. What happens now? Gabe considered the question. Now, you live your life, but with new eyes. You carry the past with you, but you don't let it weigh you down. You learn when to stand strong and when to be still. You listen more than you speak. And when the time comes, you act. June's gaze drifted to the window, watching the trees sway gently in the morning breeze. I'm scared, she confessed. Scared of what I don't understand. Of what might come. That's courage, Gabe said simply. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going anyway. Helen appeared then, her steps light but purposeful. She placed a hand gently on June's shoulder. Remember this, she said. The world will ask many things of you, but never forget who you are. A link in a chain that can never be broken. June nodded, feeling a quiet strength bloom inside her. It wasn't about fame or glory. It was about honor, quiet, steadfast, and unseen by most. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that slowly faded into the light. The farmhouse stood still, holding its secrets close but ready to face whatever came next. June took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her new reality settle into place. She was no longer just a teenager in a small town. She was part of something timeless. As the dawn promised a new day, so too did June's heart hold a quiet promise to carry forward the legacy she had been entrusted with grace, courage, and unwavering resolve. Days passed, but June felt like she was living in two worlds at once. The school hallways, the classrooms, the chatter of her friends, all felt distant, almost unreal, like she was watching from behind a glass wall. The life she once knew was still there, but something inside her had shifted irrevocably. Walking home one late afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long, orange shadows over the familiar neighborhood. June's eyes flicked toward a car parked near the corner, a black sedan with tinted windows, engine off, seemingly waiting. Her heart skipped a beat, but she told herself it was just nerves. After all, who would be watching her here? At the grocery store the next day, she noticed the quiet dignity in the people she'd once overlooked. When an elderly woman struggled with a heavy bag of groceries, June didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, offering help without a second thought. The woman's grateful smile was like a small beacon of light in her increasingly complex world. Later, back at the farmhouse, June sat with Gabe and Helen around the kitchen table. Maps were spread before them, large, faded parchments marked with red dots and cryptic notes. Each dot represented a location where the quiet still operated, places where help was needed but rarely asked for. These aren't just points on a map, Gabe explained. They're lifelines. Silent calls for aid in places no one else will go. Helen's eyes met June's, steady and unwavering. Your role won't be to fight every battle. It will be to know when to step in, to listen carefully, and to act with the precision of a scalpel, not the hammer. June nodded slowly. The responsibility felt heavy, yet strangely right. The world was far larger and darker than she'd ever imagined, but so was the courage inside her. That night, lying in bed, June stared at the ceiling, the coin still warm in her pocket. Her thoughts drifted to her great-uncle Thomas, Gabe, Olivia, Helen, the men and women who had carried their burdens in silence, protecting a world that didn't even know they existed. She understood now. Their strength wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, resilient, enduring. And now, that strength was hers. The coin pressed against her skin, a tangible reminder of the past and a promise for the future. Sometimes, the greatest battles were fought in silence. The true heroes were those who moved unseen, striking not with noise, but with presence and resolve. June knew her path wouldn't be easy. She would face moments when she felt invisible, misunderstood, and alone. But she also knew that she was no longer just a girl in a small town. She was part of something bigger, a lineage of honor and sacrifice that spanned generations. As sleep finally claimed her, June held tight to that truth. Whatever shadows lay ahead, she was ready to meet them with steady hands and a determined heart. The days had blurred into weeks, but the memory of that night, the night when 3 black SUVs parked outside her home, lingered in June's mind like a quiet drumbeat. It wasn't just a memory, it was a beginning, a turning point she felt in every step she took, every breath she drew. She moved differently now, as if a veil had lifted from her eyes. The world around her was the same, yet changed, more vivid, sharper. She noticed the small things others overlooked, a slight tremble in a stranger's hand, the way someone avoided eye contact, the faintest hint of fear hidden beneath a calm expression. It was as if the world whispered secrets only she could hear. One crisp afternoon, waiting at the bus stop, June spotted a young man across the street. His backpack looked heavy, both in weight and in spirit. He stood hunched over his phone, brows furrowed, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Something stirred inside her, that same instinct that had drawn her to help Gabe weeks ago. Without thinking, she stepped off the curb and crossed the street toward him. "Hey," she said gently. "Are you okay?" The young man looked up, startled, his eyes wary but softening when he recognized concern instead of judgment. "Yeah, just having a rough day." June smiled, a warm, quiet smile. Sometimes it helps to talk, or even just to have someone listen. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thanks. That means a lot." In that brief exchange, June realized that service, true service, wasn't always about heroic missions or classified operations. Often, it was about being present, about offering kindness when it was least expected and most needed. The quiet courage of simply showing up. Later that evening, she returned to the farmhouse, where Gabe and Helen waited in the dim light of the kitchen. Their faces were calm but serious. "We received a call," Gabe said quietly, breaking the silence. "A family in the county is in trouble." It's the kind of call that falls through the cracks. The usual channels didn't respond. Helen nodded. These are the situations the quiet exists to handle, the silent crises no one else hears or acknowledges. June felt a familiar, steady pressure in her chest, the pull of duty. She knew, deep down, that this was her moment to step forward. Olivia arrived shortly after, her face set with quiet determination. "It's time," she said firmly. Maps were spread across the table, dotted with marked locations and notes written in code. The group moved with practiced calm, discussing strategies in hushed tones. There was no haste or panic, only purpose and precision. June listened intently, absorbing every detail, every word. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was part of something larger, a network of watchful eyes, steady hands, and steadfast hearts. Her fingers brushed the coins in her pocket. The cold metal was a tangible reminder of the past she'd inherited and the future she was stepping into. As the night deepened, June prepared to take her place among the quiet, not as a soldier on a battlefield, but as a guardian of those who lived in silence, forgotten by most but protected by few. Because sometimes, the loudest call to duty was whispered in kindness. The night wrapped the farmhouse in a thick, silent blanket, the kind of quiet that settles only when the weight of purpose presses heavily on every soul present. June stood in the center of the dimly lit room, surrounded by faces etched with stories carved deep into their skin, stories of sacrifice, resilience, and quiet strength. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it a sense of renewal. Tonight was more than just another mission. It was a reclamation of dignity, an unspoken vow to honor those forgotten by history's loudest voices. The call they had answered was urgent, a family caught in the cracks of a failing system, desperate and unseen. The usual channels had failed them, but the quiet would not. This was why they existed, to protect when no one else could, to intervene when silence was the only sound left. Olivia's voice broke through the hush, calm and firm. "We don't seek glory. We seek justice. Quiet, relentless, and true." June met the eyes of those veterans who had become her mentors, her family. They were not the kind of heroes who demanded attention or medals. Their strength was in their humility, their readiness to act without applause. The plan was executed with surgical precision. No chaos, no brash moves, just controlled, deliberate action. June moved alongside them, the coins in her pocket a tangible link to the legacy she had inherited. When they reached the family's home, it was clear that the quiet presence of the quiet had already begun to restore hope. Words were few but powerful. Help was given not just in supplies or protection, but in dignity and respect. Later, back at the farmhouse, the group reconvened. Faces glowed with the quiet satisfaction of a mission fulfilled not by force, but by presence. Helen's voice softened as she addressed June. "You carried yourself with honor." Gabe smiled, his eyes reflecting pride. "It's not about how many battles you win, but whose lives you touch." June felt a tear escape down her cheek, not from weakness, but from the release of long-held fear and uncertainty. She had found belonging, purpose, and peace. As dawn broke, the first light kissed the porch, painting the world in hues of pink and gold. June stepped outside, breathing deeply, the weight in her pocket both a burden and a blessing. The world might never see the sacrifices the quiet made, but that was never their goal. They served silently, protected fiercely, and remembered endlessly. June smiled, feeling the steady beat of a legacy passed through time, alive now within her. Her journey was only beginning, but honor was restored. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.